नमस्सर्वेभ्यः। अष्टाध्यायी परिचयः इत्यस्य अद्य चतुस्त्रिंशः पाठः। अस्मिन् वर्गे पदान्ते हल् सन्धौ आदेशः कथं विधीयते इत्यस्मिन् विषये सूत्राणाम् अध्ययनं कुर्मः। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। अस्माकं वर्गस्य द्वे प्रयोजने अष्टाध्याय्याः आहत्य षट्शतस्य सूत्राणां व्याख्यासहितम् उदाहरणसहितं च अध्ययनं, तथा च अष्टाध्याय्याः प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य द्वितीयपादस्य च कण्ठस्थीकरणम्। सन्धि प्रकरणस्य अध्ययनं प्रचलत् अस्ति। तत्र त्रिषु वर्गेषु मिलित्वा अच् सन्धि प्रकरणम् अस्माभिः अधीतम्। इदानीम् अग्रे सरामः। अद्य आरभ्य पञ्चसु पाठेषु अस्माभिः हल् सन्धि प्रकरणस्य सूत्राणाम् अध्ययनं करिष्यते। किं नाम हल् सन्धि इति चेत् तत् सन्धिकार्यं यत्र पूर्ववर्णः व्यञ्जनम् अस्ति। परवर्णः स्वरः अपि भवितुमर्हति, व्यञ्जनमपि भवितुमर्हति, परन्तु पूर्ववर्णः व्यञ्जनं स्यात्। तथा च अत्र पदान्ते विद्यमानस्य व्यञ्जनस्य कार्यम् अपि अत्र हल् सन्धिषु एव स्वीक्रियते। In fact, that is exactly what we are going to learn today. Padante vidyamane hal sandhau adeshaha. So out of the 5 classes of hal sandhi, we are going to take 2 classes on padanta hal sandhi. Today's class is about padante hal sandhau adeshaha, and the next class is going to be padante hal sandhau agamaha. After these 2 classes, in the remaining classes, we will talk about apadante hal sandhau kim bhavati. But let's start with this Padanta Hal Sandhi Prakaranam. A lot of sutras today, 8 sutras we are going to study. Nalopah pratipadikantasya padante nakara lopaha bhavati. Choh kuhu padante kutvam bhavati. Jhalan jashonte padante jasthvam bhavati. Monusvaraha padante anusvaraha bhavati. And then in context of monusvaraha, there is nashcha padantasya jhali, which is apadante anusvaraha bhavati. But I have clubbed it together with monusvaraha. Then anusvarasya ययपर anusvarasya parasavarna bhavati. So this is also padanta as well as apadanta. Vapadantasya is specific apavada to anusvarasya parasavarna specifically for padanta case. So anusvarasya parasavarna can only be used for apadanta case. And finally, yaronunasike nunasiko va vikalpena anunasika deshaha pravartate. So lot of sutras, we have to run through these. Thankfully, no big Shastra Vishaya, very simple sutras. So let's get started. Before we actually jump to any sutras, let's talk about what a pada samya is. All of us know this. This is just a quick recollection. Suptingantam padam ityanena supratyanta shabdaha ting pratyanta shabdaha cha pada samyakaha bhavati. कस्यामपि प्रक्रियायां कुत्रचित् अस्य सुप् प्रत्ययस्य लोपः भवति, नो चेत् तिङ् प्रत्ययस्य लोपः भवति चेत् यत् किमपि प्रातिपदिकं नो चेत् यः कोऽपि धातुः अवशिष्यते तस्य अपि प्रत्ययलोपे प्रत्ययलक्षणम् इत्यनेन प्रत्ययविशिष्टा पदसंज्ञा अवश्यं विधीयते. So we have studied this. We have already studied the sutram pratyalope pratyalakshanam. Here is just a recollection. So nadi iti shabdat prathama ekvachanasya su iti pratyये कृते सुप्रत्ययस्य तत्र हल्ग्याभ्यो दीर्घासुतिस्य पृक्तं हल इत्यनेन लोपः भवति. So this is actually a very crucial sutram, हल्ग्याभ्यो दीर्घासुतिस्य पृक्तं हल. We are going to learn it when we enter the Subanta Prakaranam, and in today's class we are going to refer to this sutra again and again. So I'll just explain what this does. This sutra says that in the halanta words and for specific ajanta words like say mala or say nadi, these kind of ajanta words and almost all halanta words like say marut, surud and so on, the su pratyaya is removed in the prathama ekvachanam. This is the essence of halgyabhyo dirghat sutisya pruktam hal. So su iti pratyasya lopaha bhavati. एतादृशे लोपे कृते अत्र अस्मिन् उदाहरणे नदी इत्येव प्रातिपदिकम् अवशिष्यते, तस्य अपि प्रत्ययलोपे प्रत्ययलक्षणम् इत्यनेन पदसंज्ञा भवति. So what is this nadi? It is a pratipadika samnyakam padam. It retains its pratipadika samnya. On the top of it, it is going to get the pada samnya. Similarly, you can also have the example of tingantas. So hana iti dhatoho lang lakare prathama purusha ekvachanasya rupam. So tip is the pratyaya, hana is the dhatu, and because there is a lang lakara, you are doing the adagama. A plus hana plus ti. Atra ti iti pratyasya lopaha bhavati. So you don't need to worry about the sutras, but essentially the ti pratyaya is completely removed and you are only left with the dhatu along with the adagama, ahan. That's the prathama purusha ekvachana in the lang lakara for hana dhatu. So etadrushe sampurna pratyasya lope krute kevalam ahan iti adagama sahita dhatu eva shishyate. अस्य धातोः अपि प्रत्ययलक्षणेन तिङन्तत्वात् अवश्यं पदसंज्ञा भवति. So in this way, even when a pratyaya is removed, pratyalope pratyalakshanam is going to give the padasamya. This is for the pada that is generated using suptingantam padam. There is yet another way you can get a pada, and that is in the samasa prakriya. When you start doing the samasa prakriya, I'm just going to walk you through how the samasa has to be created. So in the samasa prakriya, in the very first step, you have to write the vigraha vakya. Samasa prakriyayaha prarambhaha nityam vigraha vakyena eva bhavati. तस्मादनन्तरं तत्र विद्यमानस्य पूर्वपदस्य उत्तरपदस्य च प्रकृति प्रत्यय विभागः लेखनीयः. So Radnyaha and Purushaha, these are the Purvapada and Uttarapada. You break them down into the Prakruti and the Pratyaya. So Rajan plus Nasa, because that's the Shashti Ekvachan, and Purusha plus Su, so that's the Prathama Ekvachan. So Purvapadasya Uttarapadasya cha Prakruti Pratyaya Vibhagaha Lekhaniyaha. तदनंतरम द्वयोः अपि सुप् प्रत्ययोः लोपः भवति. So technically it is the luk which is associated with those pratyas, but this sup pratyaya ngasa and the sup pratyaya su are removed. Only the two pratipadikas remain, Rajan plus Purusha. And at this particular stage, something very interesting happens. This Purva Pada of the Samasa, it retains its Pada Samya. Originally, there was a Pada Samya because it was a Subantam, Rajan plus Ngasa. Now, even after that Ngasa is removed, the Purva Pada, specifically the Purva Pada, retains the Pada Samya. The rules are slightly different for the Uttara Pada. I will not talk about them out of context for now. But what is important is that Purva Pada retains the Pada Samya. So Dvayoho api sup pratyayoho yada luk bhavati tada samase vidyamanasya purva sabdasya pada samya abadhita eva tishtati. So in this particular example, Rajan is the pada samyaka. We will not focus on the Uttara Pada, but in the Purva Pada case, Rajan is the Pada Samyaka, and then further processing happens. There are other Samasa related transformation that will happen, and finally you get the Samasta Pratipadikam. So in this intermediate set of steps, which are just represented by ... some of the steps can be related to the Hal Sandhi at the end of a Pada. So Rajan is a Pada. So Rajan ityasya padasya agre hal sandho pathitaihi sutraihi kinchit parivartanam sambhavati. So there might be other transformations also, but there can be transformations that we are going to learn in today's class. And that is the reason why I have given this slide over here and explained that a pada is also involved in the samasa prakriya. So right in this example, for instance, Rajan ityatra vidyamanasya nakarasya nalopah pratipadikantasya ittenena lopaha bhavati. That is in fact the very first sutram that we are going to learn today, how a nakara at the end of a pada, which is also a pratipadika, is removed. So Rajan is a pratipadika, it is also a pada. Pratipadika samyakam yat padam tasya antasya nakarasya lopaha bhavati is the very first sutra that we are going to study. That's the sutra Nalopah pratipadikantasya. But before that, I just want to do a quick reminder on some of the pratyaharas. There are some pratyaharas that we will again and again reference specifically in today's class. So I'll just quickly run through these. So Hal means Sarvani Vyanjanani. We are going to reference the Jhala Pratyahar again and again in today's class. So what is Jhala? Varga Chaturthaha, Varga Tritiyaha, Varga Dvitiyaha, and Varga Prathamaha. So out of those central Vargas, you just take the fifth out, the Anunasikas out, and rest all are the Jhala along with the Ushmana, Sh, Sh, S, H. So all that is included in the Jhala Pratyahara. Then there is a Pratyahara called Jasha, very well known Pratyahara, Varga Tritiya, Ga, the j, d, d and b. These are varga tritiyas, jash pratyahara. Then you have a yaya pratyahara that we are going to use. All the vargiya vyanjanas, the 25 of them, and the antasthas, ya, r, l and v. This antastha, there must be a visarga, antaha followed by sthaha, antasthaha. So ya, r, l, v, these four, and then vargiya vyanjanas. So that's the yaya pratyahara. And finally, there is a yar pratyahara that we are going to learn. Hakaram vihaya sarvani vyanjanani. So we are going to learn some karya associated with the yara pratyahara. All vyanjanas except for hakara are included in the yara pratyahara. So remember these pratyaharas. I have also, I think, have kept a separate slide, I think, on that particular, this slide is kept as bookmark. I'll come to that if it is needed. And finally, Anunasika Vyanjanani. So Anunasika Vyanjanas are ng, nya, n, m, and the Anunasika Bhedas of y, l, and w. So all this was already taught many times. I am just bringing it at the top of the memory because we are going to use that again and again in today's class. With that, let us start with the sutras. As I mentioned, a lot of sutras, so I am going to run fast. The good news is all the sutras and their examples are extremely easy. So no Shastra Vishaya in today's class at all. So the first sutra, Nalopah pratipadikantasya, as I mentioned, pratipadika samyakam yat padam, like Rajan, in Rajan plus Purusha, tadantasya nakarasya lopaha syat. So how is the sutra created? Nalopaha. Even though the sutra writes it together, the commentaries say it is two different words. Na is a separate word, lopaha is a separate word. Na is called lupta vibhaktikam. The sutra does not have any vibhakti displayed, but we have to use a shashti ekvachan of na. So lupta vibhaktikam ityukte sutre tasya vibhakti nirdeshaha nasti, parantu asmakam artha nirnayartham atra shashti vibhakti prayujyate. अतः षष्ठ्या विपरिणम्यते. It is transformed into षष्ठी विभक्ति. षष्ठ्या विपरिणम्यते. So न लुप्त विभक्तिकम षष्ठ्या विपरिणम्यते. Lopaha is prathama ekvachanam. In the next word also, pratipadikantasya, it is given as a samasta pada, but we have to break it into pratipadika and antasya. Pratipadika is again lupta vibhaktikam shashtha viparanamyate, and antasya is already in the shashti ekvachanam. This entire thing occurs in the adhikara called padasya. So the adhikara sutram, adhikara sahitam sutram will be pratipadikasya padasya antasya nasya lopaha. Now we'll understand why that shashti has been added. Pratipadikasya padasya, the pada has to be connected to the pratipadika. Antasya nasya, na has to be connected with the anta, and lopaha. So pratipadikasya iti padasya ityasya visheshanam asti. तत्पदम यत् प्रातिपदिक सम्यकमपि अस्ति इत्युक्ते तत्पदम यत्र विद्यमानः सुप्रत्ययः नो चेत् तिङ् प्रत्ययः सम्पूर्ण सुप्रत्ययः एव यतोहि प्रातिपदिकं सुप्रत्ययः सम्पूर्ण रूपेण निष्कासितः वर्तते. सो तत्पदम यत् प्रातिपदिक सम्यकम् अपि अस्ति तत्पदम यस्य निर्माण समये सुप्रत्ययस्य सम्पूर्ण रूपेण लोपः जातः इति आशयः. And as I mentioned, सूत्रे केवलं प्रातिपदिक इति शब्दः अस्ति. अत्र प्रातिपदिकस्य षष्ठ्या परिवर्तनं कृत्वा स्वीक्रियते अयं लुप्त विभक्तिकः प्रयोगः. सिमिलर्ली अन्तस्य नस्य इत्युक्ते अन्ते विद्यमानस्य नकारस्य, अतः प्रातिपदिकस्य अन्ते विद्यमानः यः नकारः, प्रातिपदे सम्नस्य पदस्य अन्ते विद्यमानः यः नकारः तस्य लोपः भवति इति अत्र सूत्रस्य अर्थः. सिंपल एग्जांपल्स. नामन इति शब्दस्य प्रथमा एकवचनस्य प्रक्रियायां सुप्रत्ययस्य, this is wrong, there is a separate sutra, by that different sutra supratyaya is removed. Let's not go about swamor napumsakat is the sutram. I suddenly realized, so swamor napumsakat is the sutram, swamor napumsakat, whatever is the sutram. But by some sutram, naman iti shabdat vihitasya su iti pratyasya swamor napumsakat iti sutrena lope krute naman ityeva avashishyate. नामन इदानीं प्रातिपदिक सम्यकं पदम अस्ति. अस्य प्रातिपदिक सम्यकस्य पदस्य नकारस्य अनेन सूत्रेण लोपे कृते प्रथमा एकवचनस्य रूपं नाम इति सिद्ध्यति. सो नामन प्लस सु इत्यत्र नलोपः प्रातिपदिकान्तस्य इति सूत्रेण अन्ते पद निर्माणं भवति. आत्मनः बोधः इत्यस्मिन् समासे आत्मन् प्लस बोध इति स्थिते पूर्वपदं प्रातिपदिकमपि अस्ति, अतः तस्य अन्ते विद्यमानस्य नकारस्य लोपे कृते आत्मबोध इति समस्तं प्रातिपदिकं सिद्ध्यति। पंचन प्लस जस, पंचन इति शब्दस्य प्रथमा बहुवचनस्य रूपे जस प्रत्ययस्य संपूर्णः लोपः भवति। So it is not necessary that only su pratyaya undergoes a lopa. Other pratyayas can also undergo a lopa. This is an example. What matters is the entire pratyaya has to be removed so that the pratipadika, which is also a pada, will remain eventually. So panchan plus jasa ityatra jas pratyasya luki krute पंचन इत्येव अवशिष्यते। इदं प्रातिपदिक संज्ञकं पदम् अस्य अंतिम नकारस्य प्रकृत सूत्रेण लोपे कृते पंच इति अंतिमं पदं सिद्ध्यति। अनेन प्रकारेण अत्र भिन्नेषु उदाहरणेषु पदसंज्ञकस्य प्रातिपदिकस्य नो चेत् प्रातिपदिकसंज्ञस्य पदस्य अंतिम नकारस्य लोपे कृते अंतिमं रूपं जायते। Let's do the dalakrutyam quickly. So nakara lopaha iti किमर्थम्? अन्यवर्णस्य लोपः न भवति, केवलं नकारस्य एव भवति। सो मरुत् प्लस सु इत्यत्रापि सु इति प्रत्ययस्य लोपः भवति, केवलं मरुत् इति प्रातिपदिक संज्ञकं पदम् अवशिष्यते, परन्तु तस्य अन्ते विद्यमानस्य तकारस्य लोपः न भवति। सो दिस सूत्र इज स्पेसिफिक टू नकार लोप, दैट्स व्हाई न लोपः इति लिखितमस्ति। प्रातिपदिकान्तस्य इति किमर्थम्? धातु संज्ञकं पदम् अस्ति चेत् तस्य अन्तिम नकारस्य लोपः न भवति। We have already seen this example of ahan. This is technically a dhatu because agama is part of the original entity. So ahan is technically a dhatu, but that dhatu has a nakara at the end. This sutra is not used because the sutra says nalopah pratipadikantasya. So dhatoh ante यद्यपि नकारः अस्ति तथापि अस्य नकारस्य प्रकृत सूत्रेण लोपः न भवति। And padasya iti kimartham? Padasya is the adhikara that is running. So padasya iti kimartham? So if you take the tritiya ekvachanam of the word atman, atman plus tritiya ekvachanam, ta pratyaha. So a pratyaha. Atman ityatra, atman plus ta. The full thing is called pada, atmana. But the internal component, atman is not pada. So it is a pratipadika, but it is not a pada. At this stage nakara will not be removed. So you need to have both the conditions, pratipadikam and padam. So atman शब्दस्य पदसंज्ञा नास्ति, तस्य अन्ते विद्यमानस्य नकारस्य लोपः न भवति, अपितु अग्रे वर्णमेलनं कृत्वा आत्मना इति पदं सिद्ध्यति। And similarly nalopa is done, pratipadika is done, padasya is done, antasya iti kimartham? Same example, when you combine atman plus a and you get atmana, it is now a pratipadika samyakam, it is now a padam, and there is a nakara in that padam which is at the end of pratipadika. But it is a pratipadika se ante vidyamanaha nakara, because atman was the pratipadika. प्रातिपदिकस्य अन्ते विद्यमानः नकारः अस्ति, परन्तु इदानीं पदस्य अन्ते सः न विद्यते। सो अत्र पदस्य अन्तभिन्नस्य नकारस्य लोपः न भवति। So basically dalakrutyam is a technique to dissect the sutram. We have tried to dissect it in different ways. You might be able to add one or more two questions and give counter examples. It's an interesting intellectual exercise. Now comes a very interesting part. This sutram is in Tripadi. It is all the way at the beginning of Tripadi, Nalopah pratipadikantasya 8 to 7. However, there are reasons, and we will not go in those reasons, but this nakara lopa is visible to the sandhi sutras of 6.1. So यद्यपि प्रकृत सूत्रम त्रिपाद्यां वर्तते, तथापि अनेन सूत्रेण कृतः नकार लोपः अच् संधि प्रकरणस्य सूत्राणां कृते सिद्धः अस्ति. We have seen something similar yesterday also. प्लुत इति संज्ञा यदा विधीयते तदा तस्य अच् संधि प्रकरणस्य सूत्राणां कृते दर्शनम् अवश्यं भवति. At that time in yesterday's class, we agreed about antaranga versus bahiranga and we justified that. No such argument is needed in this context. There is actually a sutra given by Panini in Ashtadhyayi which tells us that the nakara lopa by 8 to 7 is visible, is siddha towards the sutras of Ach Sandhi Prakaranam. Panini has elaborately given sutras for that. We will not go in the details. This is not part of this syllabus. Just understand for now that यद्यपि प्रकृत सूत्रम त्रिपाद्यां वर्तते, तथापि अनेन सूत्रेण कृतः नकारलोपः अच् संधि प्रकरणस्य सूत्राणां कृते सिद्धः अस्ति इत्युक्ते अनेन सूत्रेण नकारस्य लोपे कृते अग्रे अच् संधि कार्यम् अवश्यं संभवति। सो आत्मनः उन्नतिः इत्यत्र समास प्रक्रियायाम् आत्मन् प्लस उन्नति इति स्थिते प्रकृत सूत्रेण नकारस्य लोपे कृते आत्म प्लस उन्नति इति अवस्थायां you can actually do the guna, not can, rather you must do the guna, because samase samhita nitya, and as soon as the samhita is compulsory the guna sandhi will happen. So you cannot say atma plus unnati, you have to say atmonnati. In the same way, raja plus uvacha, so rajan is the pratipadikam, uvacha rajovacha, so it is basically between the two padas. So rajan tasya prathama ekvachanam raja, that's one pada. Uvacha is the different pada. You can still combine with the vivaksha of samhita, you can combine to say rajovacha, because the nakara lopa done by nalopa pratipadikantasya is visible to ach sandhis. And when I say ach sandhis, it is both. It is the purvadesha, which we learnt in class 31, and ekadesha, which we learnt in class 32. So this is the example of ekadesha. Similarly, you can also have the example of purvadesha. So chech iti sutrena yaha tugagamaha krutah aste, tugagamaha uktah asti, tasya krute api anena sutrena uktah lopah siddha eva asti. So radnyaha chhaya इत्यत्र राजन प्लस छाया इति स्थिते नकार लोपे कृते you have raja plus chaya. Now checha will force a tugagama there, giving raja chaya. So the nakara lopa given by this particular sutra is visible to the sutras of ach sandhi prakaranam. Now I must clarify that nakara lopa given by this particular sutram is not visible to the entire sapada saptadhyayi. It is not like a blanket siddhatva. Only in certain cases, and Panini Maharshi has mentioned it through the sutras, so only in certain cases that nakara lopa is visible, but there are going to be cases where this nakara lopa is not visible. It is a little bit complex, that's why I am not taking those sutras in this course. So कासुचित विशिष्टासु प्रक्रियासु नकार लोपः अवश्यमेव सिद्धा अस्ति. Simple example is when you are doing the subanta forms of the nakaranta words. So atman plus bhyasa, there is a nakara lopa that happens in this prakriya. Atma plus bhyasa, panchami ek bahuvachanam or chaturthi bahuvachanam. At this particular stage, the sapada saptadhyayi does not see this transformation. If the sapada saptadhyayi would have seen this transformation, then just like Rama plus Bhyas becomes Ramebhyaha, in the same way, Atma plus Bhyas would have become Atmebhyaha. Ekara would have come over there. But the Sapada Saptadhyay does not see this transformation. Therefore, Atma plus Bhyas will simply Atmabhyaha. So that's the Subanta Prakriya. This is nothing to do with Sandhis. So for the Subanta Prakriya, this Nakara Lopa is not visible. Similarly, for some other Krudanta Prakriya, for example, this Nakara Lopa is not visible, but specifically for Sandhis, this Nakara Lopa is visible, and Maharshi has given a sutra for that. That completes Nalopah Pratipadikantasya. Any questions you can ask in this context? Otherwise, we will move to the next sutram. Vidyaji.
नमस्कारः महोदय, क्षम्यतां मया इतोपि न अवगतं। तत्र पदम् इति उक्तवान् किल तत्र पूर्वस्मिन् पुटे?
Just give me 1 minute. I'm opening the sutras. अत्र before that
आत्म इत्यस्य आत्मना इत्यत्र आत्मन् इति पदमस्ति, पदं पदसंज्ञा नास्ति, आत्मन् इति उक्तवान् किल, तत् कथं महोदय? कुत्र आत्मन् इत्यस्य पदसंज्ञा भवति, कुत्र न भवति इति न अवगम्यते।
आत्मन् प्लस् टा इत्यत्र आत्मन् इत्यस्य पदसंज्ञा न भवति इति स्पष्टम्।
नाम पदस्य एव सुप् भवति किल।
Just 1 second, huh? Just give me 1 second. What are you asking?
महोदय, पदस्य एव सुप् भवति किल, प्रातिपदिकस्य एव
प्रातिपदिकस्य सुप्रत्यय विधीयते। So इति प्रातिपदिकमस्ति अस्मात् प्रातिपदिकात् टा इति सुप्रत्यय विधीयते सुप्रत्यय आत्मन् प्लस् टा इति सम्पूर्णस्य सुबन्तत्वात् पदसंज्ञा भवति सत्यम् आत्मन् इत्यस्य पदसंज्ञा न सम्भवति
अस्तु अस्तु
इदानीं स्पष्टम् इतोपि प्रश्नः
नाम समासे एव तत्र पूर्वपदस्य
समासे किं भवति पुनरेकवारम् उदाहरणं दर्शयामि तत्र समासे किं भवति तत्र मूलरूपेण सुप्रत्यय अस्ति किल ङस् इति अस्ति तत्र तस्य केवलं लोपः भवति लोपे कृते अपि प्रत्ययलोपे प्रत्ययलक्षणम् इत्यनेन अस्य पदसंज्ञा अवतिष्ठति तिष्ठति तादृशम् एव तिष्ठति सो दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग पदसंज्ञा अबाधिता एव तिष्ठति नूतनरूपेण न विधीयते पूर्वम् अस्ति एव सा अबाधिता तिष्ठति इत्येव
अवगतं महोदय धन्यवादः
एनी फर्दर क्वेश्चंस ऑन दिस Agre gacchamaha. So the next sutram in the sequence is, so we have done Nalopah pratipadikantasya. The next sutram is Choh kuhu. So simple sutram Choh kuhu. Padanta cha vargiya varnaha asti chet tasya ka vargadeshah bhavati. So cha vargasya ka vargaha syat padante or jhali. Either condition is okay. So cha vargasya ka vargaha syat jhali padante cha. What is jhala? वर्ग चतुर्था तृतीय द्वितीय प्रथम and उष्माण. So I'll talk about these in the examples. So choho kuhu iti sutram jhali iti anuvartate. So jhalo jhali ityasmat jhali iti anuvritti padasya iti adhikarah. There is no samhita adhikara. This sutram or even the previous sutram are not in the samhita adhikara, but as I mentioned saptami is there. Saptami will indicate avyavahita paranimitta. So samhita adhikara is not hard and fast over here. So anuvritti tatha adhikara sahitam sutram पदस्य झलि चोहो कुहु. What is चोहो? चु उकारान्तस्य षष्ठी एकवचनं चोहो इति इदं स्थानिरूपेण स्वीक्रियते. चु इत्यत्र उकारः इत्संज्ञकः अणुदित् सवर्णस्य चा प्रत्यय इत्यनेन अयम् उदित् शब्दः सवर्णानां ग्रहणं करोति. So chu will mean the entire ch series ch ch j jh ñ. Similarly ku will mean the entire ka series ka kha ga gha ng. And choho padasya. So choho iti padasya visheshanam. As soon as there is a visheshana and vishesha, somebody was asking yesterday, how is tadanta vidhi coming up? Because there is visheshana and vishesha, there is tadanta vidhi. So chakarantasya padasya. नो चेत् च वर्गीय वर्णान्त पदस्य चोहो इति अस्ति. सो नॉट जस्ट चकारान्त बट च वर्गीय वर्णान्तस्य पदस्य इति चोहो इत्यस्य अर्थः. कु इत्युक्ते कु वर्गः आदेशरूपेण विधीयते. एंड देयर आर टू डिफरेंट निमित्तास पदस्य और झली. इट इज नॉट टुगेदर. वी आर नॉट सेइंग पदान्ते एंड झली परे. It is not clear from the sutrartha. That's why I am explaining. What we are saying is either padante or jhali pare. So jhali iti paranimittam padante ityasya sthane pakshe svikriyate. So if you have a padanta cha vargiya varnaha, it will automatically get converted to ka vargiya varnaha. And if you don't have padanta cha vargiya varnaha, look at the paranimitta. If it is jhala letter, the conversion is allowed. So padasya ante vidyamanasya cha vargiya varnasya ka vargiya varnadeshah bhavati. No ched jhal varnah agre asti chetu padasya ante na vidyamanasya cha vargiya varnasya pi ka vargiya varnadeshah bhavati. So if it is already at the end of the pada, you don't need to see who is next. पदस्य अन्ते नास्ति चेत् अग्रे झल वर्णः अस्ति इति दृष्ट्वा एव परिवर्तनं करणीयम्. And obviously you have choho and ku 5 to 5 easy mapping. यथा संख्यम आदेशः विधीयते. So चकारस्य ककारः भवति, जकारस्य गकारः भवति, अन्येषाम् उदाहरणानि न सन्ति. So technically it is a mapping of 5 to 5, but you don't get examples of remaining 3. So chakarasya kakarah, jakarasya gakarah. So here are some examples. Vak cha artha cha in Raghuvamsha first verse. So vak and artha, this is a samasa that is happening. In the samasa, purva entity is always a pada. So purva pade, so this is all reverse written. Wait, this should be vak cha artha cha ityatra samasa prakriyayam vach iti pratipadikam. So vach is the chakaranta strilinga pratipadikam. Let me fix this actually. This is a blunder. So vach iti pratipadikam asti. Give me 1 minute. वाच इति प्रातिपदिकं, वाच इति प्लस अर्थ इति स्थिते पूर्वपदस्य अन्ते विद्यमानस्य चकारस्य ककारादेशं कृत्वा वाक् अर्थ इति जायते. सो यू हैव द पदान्त चकार वाच प्लस अर्थ इत्यत्र वाच प्लस अर्थ इत्यत्र चकार वाच इत्यस्य पदसंज्ञा पदान्ते विद्यमानस्य चकारस्य कुत्वे ककारादेशः वाक् प्लस अर्थ एंड देन लेटर ऑन जष्ट्वेन ककारस्य गकारादेशे कृते वागर्थ इति शब्दः सिद्ध्यति. भज धातोः क्त प्रत्ययान्त रूपे भज प्लस क्त इत्यत्र ककारस्य इत्संज्ञालोपे कृते भज प्लस त इति तिष्ठति. इदानीं भज इज नॉट अ पद because there is no sup or ting pratyaya being removed. This is simply a dhatu. So now it is apadanta. Padasya ante na vidyate. इत्युक्ते अpadasya ante vidyate. तस्मात् अग्रे झल वर्णः अस्ति. झल is वर्ग प्रथम द्वितीय तृतीय चतुर्थ and उष्माणज. सो झल लेटर अत्र झल वर्णः अस्ति. भज प्लस तो इति स्थिते झल सम्यके तकारे परे भज धातोः जकारस्य कुत्वे गकारादेशः भवति. So j gets converted to g. So bhag plus t इत्यस्यां प्रक्रियायां चर्त्वं भवति. गकारस्य ककारादेशे कृते भक्त इति अन्तिमं रूपं सिद्ध्यति. थर्ड एग्जांपल वाचः मुखम् इत्यत्र वाच प्लस मुख इति स्थिते चकारस्य ककारादेशे कृते वाक् प्लस मुख अग्रे जष्ट्वेन वाग् प्लस मुख. तदनन्तरं we are going to learn this sutram towards the end of the class. Yaro nunasike nunasiko va is the last sutram of today's class. See this one. Yaro nunasike nunasiko va. In by this sutram गकारस्य विकल्पेन ङकारादेशः भवति वाङ् मुख or वाग् मुख. Both are acceptable. Let's do the dalakrutyam. Udit karanam kimartham choho kuhu ubhayatra udit karanam kimartham because the sutra is not just limited to chakara gakara jakarasya api gakaradesha ishyate. So sraja इत्युक्ते माला स्रज इति जकारान्त स्त्रीलिंग शब्दः तस्य प्रथमैकवचने सुप्रत्यये कृते हल्ग्याभ्यो दीर्घात् इति सूत्रेण सुप्रत्ययस्य लोपे कृते स्रज इति अवशिष्यते. इदानीं पदान्त जकारस्य चोः कुः इति कुत्वे गकारादेशः भवति. सो स्रग इति सिद्ध्यति. एंड झलि अथवा पदान्त इति किमर्थम्? If it is neither a padanta nor it is a jhal letter, then the transformation does not happen. So vacha plus ta ityatra vacha iti padam nasti. It is a pratipadikam. Iti padam nasti. Atah chakarah padasya ante nasti. So you look at what is next. There is akara which is not a jhal letter. Therefore it is neither jhali nor padante. Therefore vacha plus a tritiya ekvachanasya rupe you do not get the choho kuhu kutvam and therefore vacha iti antimam rupam siddhyati. That completes jhalam, that completes choho kuhu. Any questions you can ask, otherwise we will go to jhalam jashonte. As I mentioned, sutras are very simple and all of you are already familiar with the sandhis. So it is only the sutras that have to be discussed newly. So the next sutram, jhalan jashonte, very well known jasthwa sandhi. Padante jhalaha jashaha syuhu. So jhalam jashaha ante. Very simple. Padasya iti adhikarah. Padasya ante jhalam. So that's shashti bahuvachanam. Jhal varnasya sthane jash varnah adesha rupena vidhiyate. So padante vidyamanasya jhal varnasya jash varnaadeshah bhavati. Jhal is varga chaturtha tritiya dvitiya prathama and ushmana. Jas is varga tritiya. उच्चारण स्थानम अनुसृत्य स्थानेन्तरतमा इत्यनेन अत्र आदेश विधानं क्रियते. So if you have k, kh, g, gh, so that's the first row. The just letter will be g. If you have ch, ch, j, jh, the just letter will be j. T, th, d, dh is the varga tritiya d. Similarly for t series it is d. For p series it is b. These are very obvious. For shakara उच्चारण स्थान अनुसृत्य इचु यशानाम तालु. So ch vargiya letter, so that's the j. Similarly for shakara ruturashanam murdha, so t vargiya letter, so that is d. Similarly for sa you get litulasanam dantaha, so t vargiya letter d. And for h akuha visarjaniyanam kantha, This is typing mistake. It should not be j. Akuha visarjaniyanam kantha. So ka vargasya varnaha g iti. So in this way, individual jhal letters are converted to just letters. Now some of these are shown in the gray color. The reason is that for these specific jhal letters, you do not get a scope of application of jhalan jashonte. Other sutras will take precedence. So simple example, if padanta chakaraha asti, padanta jakaraha asti, we just now saw choho kuhu, which is 9 sutras earlier jhalan jashonte. So choho kuhu iti sutrena asya chakarasya kutvam bhavati. So that chakara is never available for jhalan jashonte. So padanta cha vargiya varnasya jhalam jashonte iti sutrena parivartanam naiva sambhavati. In the same way, padanta shakara always gets converted to shakara. We are not going to learn the sutra, but padanta shakara always gets converted to shakara. So jhalam jashonte does not come in the picture. Padanta sakara always gets converted to ra. We are going to learn that sutra in a few classes later, I think in the visarga sandhi section. So padanta sakara gets converted to ra. So again, sa to da conversion is not possible. And padanta hakara is converted to dha. We are not going to learn that sutra. I am just giving an example. So padanta hakara is converted to dha. Ta, tha, da, dha. So again, ha to ga conversion is not possible. So for some of these cases, jhalam jashonte cannot be applied. But for other cases, we will see the examples. In fact, I am going to run over all these cases, like each square one by one, and I am going to either give examples or I am going to show why the example doesn't exist. So let's start. In all these examples, we want a pada. So I am going to use the halgyabhyos dirghat sutram. I am going to add a supratyaya. The supratyaya will be removed by this halgyabhyo dirghat sutram, and the individual pratipadika samyaka pada will remain. Tasya padasya ante vidyamanasya jhal varnasya jash adeshah agre anena sutrena katham bhavati iti udaharanam asmabhi drashtavyam. So first is padanta ka varga. Padanta ka vargiya varnasya sthane gakaraha. So you have the typical example of vach plus su. इत्यत्र वाच इति कृते चकारस्य चोः कुः इत्यनेन ककारादेशे कृते वाक् इति स्थिते अग्रे झलाञ्जसोन्ते इति सूत्रेण ककारस्य गकारादेशः भवति. So everywhere where we are saying jashtva, even in the previous classes we have said jashtva and so on, that jashtva is this jhalanjashonte. So that's the example of padanta ka vargiya varna. पदांत च वर्गीय वर्णस्य यथा मया उक्तम उदाहरणानि न विद्यन्ते. अस्य उदाहरणानि न सन्ति. किमर्थम? चकारस्य चोः कुः इत्यनेन आदौ कुत्वम विद्यते. Now after kutvam is done, then you can definitely do jashtvam. We have already seen that in the previous example. परंतु वाच इत्यस्याम अवस्थायाम झलाञ्जशोन्ते इत्यनेन jashtvam न संभवति. किमर्थम? चोः कुः इति त्रिपाद्याः पूर्वसूत्रमस्ति, अतः तस्य एव आदौ प्रयोगः करणीयः. In this way, you don't get the direct example of padanta cha vargiya varna. The next is padanta ta vargiya varna. So here is an example. You start with liha, a hakaranta word. Liha means the one who licks, essentially the fly. So madhu liha, honeybee and so on. So liha plus su pratyay krute, as I have mentioned, hakarasya dhakara desha bhavati. There is a sutram, you don't worry about it. We will learn probably in the Subanta Prakriya. That's not part of the Hal Sandhi Prakaranam. So I am going to skip it for now. So liha ityasya prathama ekavachane hakarasya dhakara desha bhavati. Once you have dha, it is a padanta ta vargiya varna. Tasya sthane dakaraha jashtvena vidhiyate. So lidha ityasya dhakarasya jashtve dakara deshe krute lidha iti siddhyati. The next is padanta ta vargiya varna. So padanta ta vargiya varnasya sthane dakaraha agnimath iti thakarantam pratipadikam asti. Asya pratipadikasya supratyay krute, supratyay is removed, agnimath iti padasamnyayam praptayam jhalanjashonte ityanena thakarasya jashtve dakaradesha agnimad iti rupam siddhyati. padanta pa vargiya varnasya sthane bakaraha anuštubha, name of that particular chandas, it is a bhakaranta pratipadika. Anuštubha इत्यत्र सुप्रत्यये कृते अनुष्टुभ इति पदत्वे सिद्धे झलान् जशोन्ते इत्यनेन भकारस्य बकारादेशे अनुष्टुभ इति सिद्ध्यति. So that's the 5 वर्गीय व्यंजनास. Then we come to the shakara. Padanta shakarasya sthane jakaraha. As I mentioned, asya udaharanani na vidyante. Kimartham? Padanta shakarasya nityam shatvam bhavati. Padanta, there is a sutram. We will learn it in the Tinganta Prakaranam many classes later. But Padanta shakarasya kenachit sutrena shatvam bhavati. Etadrishe shatve krute तदनन्तरं तस्य शकारस्य इत्युक्ते मूर्धन्य शकारस्य जष्ट्वेन डकारादेशः संभवति. So षत्वे कृते जष्ट्वेन डकारादेशः अवश्यं संभवति. That's immediately the next bullet. In fact, पदान्त शकारस्य जष्ट्वेन डकारः. तो शश plus su, शश means 6. That's the प्रातिपदिकम. शश plus su इत्यत्र सु प्रत्ययस्य लोपे कृते शश इति शकारान्तं पदम्. And then jhalan jashonte ityanena shakarasya jashtve dakaradesha. Sh is murdhanya, so the corresponding murdhanya jash letter is d. Rutu rashana murdha. So dakaradeshe krute shad iti rupam siddhyati. So that's essentially shakara getting converted to dakara. Finally, sakarasya sthane dakaraha asya udaharani na vidyante yatohi sakarasya अन्येन केनचित् सूत्रेण रुत्वं भवति. अस्य रुत्वस्य अग्रे विसर्गादेशः भवति. We will learn that in details in the prakriya of visarga sandhi. अस्यां प्रक्रियायां कुत्रापि जश्त्वं न प्रवर्तते. And finally, hakarasya sthane gakarah. So akuha visarjaniyanaam kantha. So hakarasya sthane kanthyaha gakarah. Asyapi udaharanani na vidyante. I just showed that hakara gets converted to dhakara in most of the cases, and then the jashtva will happen, dha will get converted to da. In some cases, hakara is converted to dha or hakara is converted to gha. So upanah means footwear. Upanah ityasya supratyaya krute upanadha iti parivartanam bhavati. So ha is converted to dha. These are all the sutras of Subanta Prakaranam. We will learn them. I am just using them to show where jashtva happens, because jashtva is what we are discussing. So upanah ityasya hakarasya dhakaradeshe krute upanadha iti siddhe. Now you can have a jashtva dhakarasya dakaradeshah jashtvena bhavati. In this particular way, we have seen all possible examples. I ran through them, but you need to go and revise. Dalakrutyam padantasya jhalvarnasya iti kimartham marut plus ta इत्युक्ते आ इत्यत्र मरुत् इत्यस्य तकारः पदान्ते नास्ति. पदान्ते तु आकारः अस्ति, अतः अस्य तकारस्य जश्त्वं न भवति. And jhalam iti kimartham? So there is a pratipadikam called sugana. The one who can count flawlessly is called sugana. Sugana is an akaranta pratipadikam. So sugana ityasya supratyaya krute हल्ज्ञाभ्यो सूत्रेण सुप्रत्ययस्य लोपे कृते सुगण इति अवशिष्यते. अत्र णकारस्य जश्त्वं न भवति. Even though it is a pada, ण is not in the jhal pratyahara. So atra णकारस्य जश्त्वं न भवति. That completes the running commentary of jashtvam. So we have studied 3 sutras: Nalopah pratipadikantasya, Choh and jhalan jashonte. The next 4 sutras are about the Anusvara. So monusvaraha, nashapadantasya jhali, anusvarasya parasavarna, and vapadantasya. These are all about Anusvara. Everything is already known to you because you have studied these sandhis in your Shiksha Kovida studies. Only the sutras are being taught. But before that, if there are any questions on either Kutva or Jashtva, please ask them right now. Okay, no questions. Agre gacchamaha. Let's talk about Anusvara. अनुस्वारस्य निर्माणं कथं भवति इति प्रारम्भे पश्यामः. तदनन्तरम् अनुस्वारस्य अन्येषु वर्णेषु परिवर्तनं कथं भवति तदपि पाठयामि. So अनुस्वारस्य निर्माणं कथं भवति? We all know this. पदान्तमकारस्य हल् वर्णे परे अनुस्वारादेशः. हरिम प्लस वंदे इत्यत्र संहितायाः विवक्षायां मकारस्य अनुस्वारादेशः हरिं वंदे इति भवति. मोनुस्वारः is the sutram for that. Now it turns out that even when there is apadanta makara, a makara that is not at end of the pada, it will undergo an anuswara desha. The condition is slightly different. Instead of hal letter, you need a jhal letter. So if you have an apadanta makara, for the when there is a jhala letter in front, it will get converted to anuswara. So nama iti dhatuhu asti. The bhavishyat kala lrut lakara form of nama is namsyati. There is an anuswara over there. How is that created? You have nama dhatu, you have the vikarana pratyaya sya, and then you have the pratyaya, the actual thing pratyaya ti. Nama plus sya plus ti ityatra makarasya झल वर्णे परे, सकार इज द झल लेटर, झल वर्णे परे अनुस्वारादेशः भवति, नम्स्यति इति सिद्ध्यति. So that sutram is called naschapadaantasya jhali. Very simple sutram. So naha cha apadantasya jhali. So apadanta nakarah asti chet and chakarena makarah api tatra anuvritti rupena svikriyate. So अपदान्तः नकारः मकारः वा अस्ति चेत् झलि परे तस्य अनुस्वारादेशः भवति. सो अपदान्त मकारस्य अत्र उदाहरणमस्ति, मकारस्य अनुस्वारादेशः झल् वर्णे परे. सिमिलर्ली सेम सूत्रम अपदान्त नकारस्य झल् वर्णे परे अपि अनुस्वारादेशः. सो धनुष इति शब्दस्य प्रथमा बहुवचनस्य रूपं धनुः धनुषि धनुंषि. सो इत्यत्र धनुष इति शब्दस्य प्रथमा बहुवचनस्य रूपं धनुष प्लस ई इत्यत्र there is a numagama over there. So na is inserted before shakara. We are going to learn all this in the subanta prakriya, but na is inserted before shakara. I am purposely not giving the sutras because I don't want you to be bogged down by the sutras. Only the sutras specific to hal sandhi are being taught. Everything else you just have to assume. So tatra nakaraha agama rupena numagama rupena vidhiyate. So the construct becomes dhanu, then na, then sh, then e, and then at this particular stage there is a jhala letter, shakara in front, nakara is not at the end of the pada. So this is apadanta nakara, jhal varne pare tasya anuswaradeshah bhavati. So dhanunshi iti rupam bhavati. I somehow forgot now. This has to be dirgha, dhanunshi. So this has to be, that's what I wanted to confirm. This has to be dirgha. There is a sutram that santamanta sayogasya will cause a dirgha. So here is a typing mistake over here. Dhanunshi, it should be dirgha. But that doesn't change any of that particular discussion. In fact, I have opened this prakriya of dhanunshi. You can see the actual sutra. Naschapadantasya jhali iti apadanta nakarasya jhali pare anuswaraha. So that's the sutram that I'm teaching right now. So apadanta nakarasya jhal varne pare anuswara deshaha bhavati. So that's the na getting converted to anuswara. So this way anuswara is created through three mechanisms. Padanta makarasya hal varne pare anuswaraha, apadanta makarasya jhal varne pare anuswaraha, and apadanta nakarasya jhal varne pare anuswaraha. The last two conditions are captured in a single sutram. The top condition has a separate sutra. Now, once that anuswara is created, later in the prakriya, it will get converted to parasavarna. So this is a parasavarna sandhi. So it is getting converted to the savarna of whatever is immediately after it. So there are two sutras for that. Apadantaha anuswara asti. So an anuswara that is created by the last two rules. Apadanta anuswara asti. Tarhi tasya yay varne pare. What is a yay? Let's recollect. Yay is vargiya vyanjanas and antasthas. So ka to ma and yaralava. So etadrishaha avapadanta anuswara asti. तस्य य वर्णे परे नित्यं परसवर्णादेशः भवति. So kapi is the dhatu in the dhatu patha. In the aupadeshika form, it is written as kapi with an it samyaka ikara. Somewhere in the prakriya, the kapi dhatu is converted into ka, a numagama happens, and p. So numagama happens immediately after the last swara. So k plus n plus p. We don't need to worry about how it happens, but at some step in the prakriya, a numagama happens. This numagama, this nakara is there. After this nakara, there is a pakara. So this nakara is apadanta nakara. There is a jhal letter after it. अपदांत नकारस्य झल वर्णे परे अनुस्वारादेशः भवति. So that's the previous table, the last row of the previous table, that is giving an anuswara. And now when you have kampa with the anuswara, the anuswarasya yay varne pare parasavarnadeshah bhavati. So there is this anuswara, there is a yay letter, because yay is all vargiya vyanjanas and the antasthas. So there is a yay letter in front. The anuswara is compulsorily converted to parasavarna. Pakarasya parasavarnaha anuswara sadrishaha makaraha. So you get kampa. So see the whole process. It starts with kapi, then it becomes kanpa with nakara, then it becomes kampa with anuswara, and then it becomes kampa with a proper makara. This is how anuswarasya, apadanta anuswarasya, ye varne pare parasavarnadeshah nityam bhavati. And if it is a padanta anuswara which is created by the first rule in the previous table, so if it is a padanta anuswara, tasya yay varne pare vikalpena parasavarnadeshah bhavati. So harim plus cha इत्यत्र हरिम इति पदम अस्ति. पदान्ते विद्यमानस्य मकारस्य पूर्वेन नियमेन अनुस्वारादेशः. So harim with an anuswara and then cha. There is compulsory samhita. So harim cha. And then this anuswara is optionally converted to parasavarna. Tasya vikalpena parasavarnadeshah bhavati. Chakarasya savarnaha nyakarah. So harincha, or you can retain the anuswara as it is, harincha. In this way, padanta anuswarasya ye varne pare vikalpena parasavarnadeshah, apadanta anuswarasya ye varne pare nityam parasavarnadeshah. So this is the summary of those 4 sutras. There are 2 sutras that create the anuswara, and there are 2 sutras that convert the anuswara to parasavarna. So these are the 4 sutras that are what we are going to learn immediately next. So you have monuswaraha and nischapadantasya jhali. These are the ones that create the anuswara, and anuswarase parasavarna vapadantasya. These are the ones that will convert the anuswara to parasavarna. Any questions on the table? If not, let's move. Now just the 4 sutras, very simple sutras. First is mo anuswaraha, mantasya padasya anuswaraha syad hali samhitayam. So maha anuswaraha, hali iti anuvartate. Padasya and samhitayam are the anuvrittis. Mahapadasya ityukte tadantavidhi makarantasya padasya samhitayam hali halvarne pare anuswaradeshah bhavati. So anuswara is the adesha. Makarantasya varnasya hal varne pare makarantasya padasya antima varnasya hal varne pare samhitayam anuswaraha bhavati. See what is going on, just see keenly. All that we are saying is makarantasya padasya anuswaraha bhavati. So entire pada is being converted to anuswara. But now the alontyasya sutra will kick in. Alontyasya will say that ekal adesha antima varnasya eva bhavati. See how many sutras are being interlinked. Only we are saying Mahapadasya. So actually what we are saying is Mahapadasya. You can see it's there in the Anuvritti Adhikara Sahitam Sutram. Mahapadasya. Step number 1, apply Tadanta Vidhi. So Makarantasya Padasya Anuswaraha. But is the entire pada getting converted to Anuswaraha? No. Then apply alontyasya. So 2 paribhashas are being applied. Yena vidhis tadantasya followed by alontyasya. So makarantasya padasya anuswaraha ityukte makarantasya padasya yaha antima varnaha ityukte makaraha tasya anuswaraha. So makarantasya padasya antima varnasya hal varne pare samhitayam anuswaradeshah bhavati. Harim vande is one example. Samharati upasarga dhatur madhye samhita nitya. So samharati, you have to put an anuswara over there. You cannot just keep a ma. So samharati, atra samhita nitya, alankrutya. This is a samasa. Atrapi samhita nitya, alankrutya. Put an anuswara. But see the difference. This is a padanta anuswara. So you can optionally convert it into parasavarna with alankrutya, with a ngakara, also an acceptable form. I'll talk about the same example a few slides later, but this was all about monuswara. The next is naschapadantasya jhali. So naha cha apadantasya jhali is the immediate next sutram. So monuswara 8323, naschapadantasya jhali 8324. Immediately next sutram. So naha cha अपादान्तस्य झलि चकारेण महा इत्यस्यापि अनुवृत्तिः भवति अनुस्वार इत्यस्यापि अनुवृत्तिः भवति संहितायाम् इति अधिकारः अपदान्तस्य नकारस्य मकारस्य च संहितायां झलि earlier it was hali monuswara had the anuvritti of hali that is being overwritten by झलि अनुस्वारादेशः भवति so अपदान्तस्य नकारस्य इत्युक्ते अपदान्तस्य नकारस्य स्थाने पदस्य अन्ते नास्ति is अपदान्तस्य which can mean अpadस्य अन्ते अस्ति in other words पदस्य मध्ये अस्ति both of them are acceptable so पदस्य मध्ये अस्ति अथवा अपदस्य अन्ते अस्ति उभयथा अर्थः साधु similarly अपदान्तस्य मकारस्य अपदान्त मकारस्य स्थाने अत्रापि सः मकारः यः पदस्य अन्ते नास्ति तादृशस्य अनुस्वारादेशः भवति कदा भवति झलि झल वर्णे परे so what is the final meaning अपदान्त नकारस्य अपदान्त मकारस्य वा झल वर्णे परे अनुस्वारादेशः भवति examples are already explained in the table dhanush इत्यत्र धनु plus न plus श plus ई इति स्थिते अपदान्त नकारस्य अनुस्वारादेशे कृते धनुंषि इति रूपं सिद्ध्यति So again, I made a typing mistake. Instead of hrasva ukara, it should be dirgha ukara. But the point is not ukara. The point is anuswara desha. So nakara is converted to anuswara. Second example, again I have shown this. Nama iti dhatoho lrut lakarasya prakriyayam nama plus ya plus ti ityatra apadanta makarasya namsyati iti anuswara deshe krute namsyati iti rupam siddhyati. Yet another example very similar to that kapi dhatu so there is a ghushi dhatu yaha atra ikarha vartate ghushi ityatra प्राकृतिक कार्य सोपाने इकारस्य इकारः इत्सम्यकः अस्ति तस्य अनन्तरं लोपं कृत्वा नकारस्य आगमः भवति so just like in that previous example kapi got converted to kanapa in the same way here atrapi घुषि इत्यस्य स्थाने घुनश इति स्थितिः भवति अस्यां प्रक्रियायाम् अपदान्त नकारस्य प्रकृतसूत्रेण अनुस्वारादेशे कृते घुंश with an anuswara so घुंश इति सिद्ध्यति there is a jhala letter in front so अपदान्त नकारस्य अनुस्वारः भवति the actual forms are घुंशते घुंशेते घुंशन्ते with an anuswara. Let's do a quick dalakrutyam on naschapadantasya jhali. So, apadanta nakarasya iti kim. See what is happening. Makara can be padanta or apadanta. Because padanta makara is covered in the previous sutra. Apadanta makara is covered in the current sutra. Parantu nakarasya vishaye kevalam apadanta nakarasya eva atra grahanam कृतम् अस्ति. पूर्वस्मिन् सूत्रे पदान्त नकारस्य ग्रहणमेव कृतं नास्ति. अतः अपदान्त नकारस्य इति किमर्थं पदान्त नकारस्य अनुस्वारादेशः न भवति हे राजन् गच्छ इत्यत्र पदान्त नकारः वर्तते तस्य अनुस्वारादेशः न भवति एंड नश्चापदान्तस्य झलि इति किमर्थं झल वर्णे परे अत्र अनुस्वार झल वर्णे नास्ति झल भिन्ने वर्णे परे अत्र अनुस्वारादेशः न भवति सो इन द प्रीवियस सूत्र इट वाज एनी व्यंजन हल वर्णः अस्ति चेत् मकारस्य अनुस्वारः बट हियर द कंडीशन इज रेस्ट्रिक्टेड यू नीड अ झल लेटर व्हाट इज अ झल वर्ग चतुर्थ तृतीय द्वितीय प्रथम एंड उष्माणज सो एज कंपेयर्ड टू हल लेटर्स व्हाट इज एक्सक्लूडेड the varga panchamas are excluded, the antasthas are excluded, and the swaras are also excluded. So if there is apadanta nakara or if there is apadanta makara, but there is no jhal letter in front, there is either a swara, there is either an antastha, or there is either a varga panchama. In none of these cases you will apply the current sutram. So gama plus aniyar इत्यत्र अपदान्तमकारः अस्ति परन्तु झल् वर्णः नास्ति, अतः अत्र अनुस्वारादेशः न भवति. हन्यते, द कर्मणि फॉर्म हन्यते, नकारादनन्तरं यकारः, अपदान्तनकारः अस्ति परन्तु अनन्तरं यकारः विद्यते, अतः अत्र अनुस्वारादेशः न भवति. हन धातोः उत्तम पुरुष एकवचनस्य रूपं हन्मि, अपदान्तनकारः परन्तु अनन्तरं वर्गपञ्चमः अस्ति, नॉट अ झल्, अतः अत्र अनुस्वारादेशः न भवति. See, I always recommend do dalakrutyam because doing the dalakrutyam will enhance your own understanding of that sutram. So nashchapadantasya jhali iti sutrasya jnanam सम्यक् रूपेण वर्धेत इत्यर्थं किं करणीयं, तत्र दलकृत्यं द्रष्टव्यं. तस्मिन् सूत्रे विद्यमानस्य प्रत्येकं शब्दस्य उपयोगिता कीदृशी अस्ति, अस्मिन् विषये प्रत्युदाहरणानि दातव्यानि. So for most sutras, I will do these at least in the sandhi prakaranam case. Then we will see how difficult or easy it is, and then we will take a call after that. So these are the two sutras, Monuswaraha and Nashchapadantasya Jali, that talk about the creation of Anuswara. Now we will talk about Anuswarasya parasavarnaha kada bhavati. So first sutram is about apadanta Anuswara. Technically the sutra doesn't talk about apadanta. It is like dirghat and padantadva, like we saw in the very first class, 31st class, that one sutra will give a general condition, but the next one overrides it only for the padanta case. Effectively, it means that the previous sutra can only be used for apadanta case. So that is the case over here. In the sutram, you don't see the apadanta case, but the padanta is being overwritten as the apavada in the next sutram. So let's see the current sutra first. Anusvarasya yayi parasavarnaha. Very simple. Anusvarasya yay varne pare parasavarnadeshaha bhavati. So Anusvarasya samhitayam yayi parasavarnaha. Yay is all the antasthas and vargiya vyanjanas. Yay varne pare anusvarasya parasavarnadeshaha bhavati. Anusvarasya sthane paravarnasya anunasikaha savarnaha vidhiyate. And as I mentioned, idam sutram kevalam apadanta anuswarasya vishe eva prayujyate. पदांत अनुस्वारस्य विषय अस्य बाधक रूपेण वा पदान्तस्य, so optional वा पदान्तस्य इति अग्रिमं सूत्रं प्रवर्तते. So what are the parasavarnas? क वर्गीयस्य परसवर्णः ङकारः, च वर्गीयस्य ञकारः, ट वर्गीयस्य णकारः, त वर्गीयस्य नकारः, प वर्गीयस्य मकारः. य इत्यस्य स्थाने अनुनासिक यकारः, ल इत्यस्य स्थाने अनुनासिक लकारः, व इत्यस्य स्थाने अनुनासिक वकारः. Now please understand, these are not the adeshas to those paravarnas. So it is not like ka vargiyasya adeshaha ngakaraha bhavati. The adesha is for the anuswara. That's what I am saying. Anuswara adeshaha. Anuswarasya sthane ngakaradeshaha vidhiyate agre ka vargiya varna asti chet. Similarly, anuswarasya sthane anunasikaha lakaraha vidhiyate agre la varna asti chet. We are going to see all these examples. So let's start with the examples. Udaharanani. Nakarat nirmitah apadanta anuswara. Let's talk about the nakara because maximum examples are for nakara. So aki iti dhatuhu tasya itsamya lope krute ak. Then as I mentioned, the nakara is introduced. Anytime you see a raswa ikara, that is itsamyaka in a dhatu, a nakara will be introduced. We will learn this in the later part of the course when we will study dhatus. But in general, remember that anytime there is an itsamyaka ikara, the nakara will be introduced. A numagama happens. So anka iti sthite nashchapadantasya jhaliti nakarasya anuswara deshe anka with an anuswara. Anuswarasya yai parasavarna iti parasavarne krute anka. So you cannot write it with an anuswara. The parasavarna is compulsory. Anka with a nakara. Similarly, I am just picking dhatus that have a specific varna after the nakara. So guji iti dhatu. गुंज इति तस्य रूपम. नकारस्य अनुस्वारादेशे कृते गुंज, परसवर्णे कृते गुंज विद यकार. सिमिलरली नद इति धातु नंद, स्फुड इति धातु स्फुंड, and kapa iti dhatu, I have already explained that kampa. So in all these cases, anuswarasya parasavarnena makaradeshaha vidhiyate. You don't see the examples of others like ya, va, la at the apadanta case. You only see those in the padanta case. So that's all about the examples for the apadanta nakara. We have one example for apadanta makara. I mean, you can give many. I've just given one. Gama iti dhatoho truch pratyayanta rupam karaniyam asti chet gama plus tru ityatra makarasya nashchapadantasya jhali iti anuswaradeshaha. So gan plus tru and then anuswarasya yahi parasavarna ityanena parasavarnadeshe krute gantru. So apadanta makarasya anusware krute agre parasavarnena nakaraha vidhiyate. दलकृत्यम अनुस्वारस्य यै इति किमर्थम यै भिन्ने वर्णे परे अनुस्वारस्य किमपि न भवति. सो धनुंषि इत्यत्र नश्चापदान्तस्य झलि इत्यनेन झल वर्णे परे अनुस्वारः कृतः. So the previous sutram was applicable. Let's go to the 4-5 slides earlier in the table and then this will be clear. So in the case of Dhanunshi, झल वर्णः अग्रे आसीत् अतः अनुस्वारादेशः तु अवश्यं जातः, परन्तु अस्य अनुस्वारस्य अग्रे यै वर्णः अस्ति चेदेव परसवर्णः भवति. There is no यै letter over here. The parasavarna cannot happen. So dhanunshi इत्यत्र अनुस्वारः एव तिष्ठति. So that was the example that was given over here. The यै इति किमर्थम यै भिन्ने परणे अनुस्वारः तादृशः एव तिष्ठति. So dhanunshi, namsyati, ghumshate, all these examples have already been taught. Now remember, many classes ago before the break, while discussing the tripadi asiddhatva, we talked about a very specific prakriya called kurvanti, charanti, kurvanti and so on. What was happening in that prakriya? I'll take an example of charanti. You have chara plus anti and the question was, why can nakara not become a nakara? There is already a repa there. So why not charanati? And what was the answer given? The answer was given that first the nakara will get converted to anuswara by nashchapadantasya jhali. So that is in 8.3. So nashchapadantasya jhali is in 8.3. You can see the sutra numbers. It is in 8.3.24. After that conversion happens, you have charanti with an anuswara. At that particular step, the natva prakarnam, which is in 8.4.1, cannot find a nakara, so you cannot convert it into nakara. And later on, after the entire natva prakaranam is over, towards the end of Ashtadhyayi, you have anuswarasya yayi parasavarnaha. That anuswara will automatically get converted to nakara again because of this sutram. So specifically, purely for the natva prakaranam, Panini very cleverly hides that nakara in form of anuswara and brings it back. That is exactly what is written in Siddhanta Kaumudi in this sutram. Kurvanti ityatra natve prapte tasya asiddhatvat anusware parasavarne cha krute tasya parasavarnasya asiddhatvat natvam na bhavati. So that sandwiching, that is what is prohibiting the natvam. The natva is sandwiched between the creation of anuswara and removal of anuswara. Because of that, the natvam is not happening. This is the sentence from Siddhanta Kaumudi. Now you will be able to understand it. Kurvanti ityatra natve prapte tasya asiddhatvat anusware parasavarne cha krute tasya asiddhatvat natvam na bhavati. So this is about anuswarasya yayi parasavarna. Somebody is asking what happens for an example like sanyama. In case of sanyama, there is an anuswara, but it is a sama plus yama, and sama is a pada because it is an upasarga. So the next sutram va padantasya will actually take care of that, and I think we have some similar examples. You will be able to understand that at that moment. But sanyama is not in the context of the current sutram because the current sutram is only for apadanta anuswara. In Sanyama, there is a sama upasarga. Upasargas are padas, padas on their own. So even though makara is getting converted to that anuswara, it is a padanta anuswara, which is the topic of our next sutram, va padantasya. There are a few hands raised, but I'll finish the discussion and then we will take the question. सो वा पदान्तस्य इति अग्रिमं सूत्रं पदान्तस्य अनुस्वारस्य ये वर्णे परे परसवर्णः वा स्यात्. सो नाउ इट इज ऑप्शनल. पदान्तस्य अनुस्वारस्य यै संहितायां वा परसवर्णः पदान्ते विद्यमानस्य अनुस्वारस्य ये वर्णे परे संहितायां विकल्पेन परसवर्णः भवति. सो दैट्स व्हाट वा इंडिकेट्स. विकल्पेन परसवर्णः भवति पक्षे अनुस्वारः एव तिष्ठति. सो नाउ दिस इज प्राप्त विभाषा. पूर्वेण नित्यं परसवर्णादेशे प्राप्ते इदानीं सः विकल्प्यते. द प्रीवियस सूत्र सेज नित्यं परसवर्णः अनुस्वारस्य यै परसवर्णः, and now it is being made optional for the padanta case. So purvam prapte anantaram vikalpena nishedha. So that's the prapta vibhasha. Here are examples. Alankrutya, as I mentioned earlier. You start with alam with a makara, and that makara is converted to anuswara by monuswaraha. Because it is a padanta, always monuswara will come first. Monuswara will convert it to anuswara, and then parasavarna is optional. So alankrutya with an nakara or alankrutya with an anuswara. Sancharati, this is an example with upasarga. Sama, the ma is getting converted to anuswara. Sancharati, you can write it as sancharati with anuswara. You can write it as sancharati with parasavarna because va padantasya. See, this is the purpose, this is the good or benefit of learning Panini Sutras. Before today's class, if somebody asks you which of these is correct, all that you could have said is that my Sandhi book told me that both are correct, therefore both are correct. But starting today, you can actually tell this. Panini has a sutra called Vapadantasya, therefore Sancharati with an Anuswara is also correct and Sancharati with an Akara is also correct. And this particular argument, Panini has said this and such is the sutra, is extremely powerful, is 100 million times powerful than saying my Sandhi book has both the examples, therefore both of them are correct. So this is why you should learn grammar. One of the fundamental reasons of learning grammar is to be extremely confident about what prayogas you are doing because you can back them up with the sutras. Yet another example, kindayate ityatra anuswarasya vikalpena parasvarnadeshe krute kindayate nochet kindayate. Aham namami, you can say aham namami or aham namami. Tvam bhitaha, you can say tvam bhitaha with a makara or with an anuswara. Tvam yasi, Tvayasi with an Anunasika yakara or Tvamyasi with just the Anuswara. That's also the case with Samya. Samya, you can write with an Anuswara or you can write Samya with Anunasika yakara followed by Yama. So Samyama, Sallapa, Samvada, Lava. These are the next examples. Harim Vande or Samvada. Harim Vande. Similarly, Samvada, you can convert it into optional Anunasika Vakaradesha. Kim Labdham or Sallapa, you can use it as an Anuswara or you can have Kya Labdham, Sallapaha. So, Lakara can also, Anunasika Lakara can also be brought in. Kashika gives a very beautiful example. He gives one statement with all possible conversion. So, Tam Katham Chitrapaksham Dayamanam Nabhastham Purushaha Avadhit. This is the statement, and then he's assuming the samhita, and then because there is a kakara, chakara, dakara, nakara, and pakara, the corresponding varga panchamas are coming as the parasavarnas. Tang kathay chitrapakshandayamanan navastham purushovadhit. So you try to find out the meaning of this. Very simple actually. Tam katham chitrapaksham dayamanam nabhastham purushaha avadhit. How could that or how did that person kill that particular bird who was flying in the skies? So tam chitrapaksham katham tam nabhastham dayamanam chitrapaksham purushaha katham avadhit. So he has very beautifully used this sutram in multiple different words in this statement. And dalakrutyam, very beautiful. Parasavarnaha iti kimartham anuswarasya yai parasavarnaha. If the parasavarna does not exist, then you cannot convert. So samrakshanam ityatra sam ityatra padante anuswarah asti. Sam is the upasarga which is the pada. So padante anuswarah asti. Parantu rephasya savarnaha na vartate. अतः अत्र संरक्षणम् इत्यत्र अग्रे य वर्णे स्थिते अपि पदान्ते अनुस्वारस्य उपस्थितौ अपि अनुस्वारस्य परसवर्णादेशः न भवति. सो परसवर्णा इति किमर्थं? परसवर्णः न सम्भवति चेत् परसवर्णादेशः न भवति. So that completes our table with 2 sutras that create an Anuswara and 2 more sutras that convert Anuswara to Parasavarna. We have only one last sutra remaining, Yarununasike Inunasiko Va, and then we will conclude. But now I'll take questions. I request the questions should only be specific to the slides that we are discussing right now, because otherwise we are running out of time. Ratnakar Mahoday.
Acharya, very basic. Please don't mind. If I look at the slides or the explanation what you give, am I being audible?
Yes, yes.
So Monuswara, Nasya Padantasya Jali, and Yei Parasavarna. All these 3 sutras go side by side. If I look at the examples, they appear so. But is that so?
That is correct. So in most of the cases, side by side doesn't necessarily mean immediately one after the other.
Correct.
But they will be in one, yes, chronologically they will be in the sequence. So they will be either Monuswara or Nashapadanta Sijali, not both of them, because one of them is for Makara, other is for Apadanta Nakara. But one of them, and then followed by, in most cases, there will be Anuswara Se Parasavarna. You will find examples where there is Monuswara and Nashapadanta Sijali without Anuswara Se Parasavarna. So for example, Samrakshanam and so on. But in most of the Prakriyas, you will find them one after the other.
Fine.
Okay, one last sutram and we are done. So the last sutram is Yaronunasike Nunasiko Va. Again, all of you know this sandhi, just giving the sutram. Let's actually see the example first and then you will be able to understand. So Yaronunasike Nunasiko Va iti sutrena kim bhavati? Padante vidyamanasya yar varnasya. What is yar? Hakaram vihaya sarvani vyanjanani. So padante vidyamanasya yar varnasya अनुनासिक वर्णे परे विकल्पेन अनुनासिकादेशः भवति. सो यरः अनुनासिके अनुनासिकः वा. Very simple. Now you should be able to understand. Yar varnasya and then padantat iti anuvritti asti padantasya iti viparinamyate. So padante vidyamanasya yar varnasya अनुनासिके परे अनुनासिकादेशः भवति संहितायाम. So यरः पदान्तस्य, so पदान्ते विद्यमानस्य यर्वर्णस्य अनुनासिके वर्णे परे विकल्पेन अनुनासिकादेशः भवति. What is an अनुनासिकादेश? वर्गीय व्यञ्जनानाम् आदेशरूपेण वर्गपञ्चमः. So if the padanta yarvarna is there, it will be converted to varga panchama of that particular varga. If there is a lakara, it will be converted to anunasika lakara. Anyesham udaharanani na sambhavanti. So padanta yakara, padanta vakara, you don't get examples. Padanta lakara adesh rupena anunasika lakaraha vargiya vyanjananam adesh rupena varga panchamaha. For others, there is anyway no parasavarna. There is no anunasika possible, that is a savarna. Example. So vachaha mukham. Vacha plus mukha. Now see the whole sequence. Vacha plus mukha. Adau kutvam. Choho kuhu iti kutve. Vaka plus mukha. Then jashtvam. Jhalam jashonte iti jashtve. Vaga plus mukha. Unless you execute these choho kuhu and jhalan jashonte, you cannot even think of your onunasike nunasikova. So your onunasike nunasikova says padanta yarvarnasya anunasika deshaha bhavati. In the initial state also, chakara is a yarvarna. In the middle state also, kakara is a yarvarna. But you cannot think of this sutram because of the rules of Tripadi. In the case of vacha plus mukha, you have to do the kutva. Vaka plus mukha, you have to do the jasthva. When all other sutras are done, in vaga plus mukha, there is no other intermediate sutram. So see, from 8 to 30, you jump to 8 to 39, and then you are directly jumping to 8 for 45. There is nothing in between that will make any changes. So vaga plus mukha ityatra padante vidyamanasya yarvarnasya ityukte gakarasya अनुनासिकवर्णे परे विकल्पेन अनुनासिकादेशः भवति। ङकारस्य अनुनासिकादेशः ङकारः, सो वाङ्मुख इति सिद्ध्यति, पक्षे वाग्मुख इति अपि साधु। This is vikalpena anunasikadeshah, so you can do vangmukha, but this is optional, which means you can stop at vagmukha and not apply the next year onunasike nunasiko va. Chohokuhu is not optional, jhalan jashonte is not optional, so you have to do those. Vagmukha iti sthite agre vikalpah asti, so you can either have vagmukha or you can have vangmukha. Another example, षड मुखानि यस्य सहा, शश प्लस मुख, प्रातिपदिक में शश प्लस मुख, शश इत्यत्र शकारस्य झलाञ्जसोन्ते इति डकारादेशे कृते अग्रे डकारस्य विकल्पेन अनुनासिकादेशः, सो षण्मुख और षड्मुख, either is possible. जगतः नाथः, जगत प्लस नाथः, झलाञ्जसोन्ते इति चष्ट्वे जगद प्लस नाथः, अग्रे विकल्पेन अनुनासिकादेशे कृते जगन्नाथः, in other case or pakshe jagadnatha. So jagannatha is very popular, but jagadnatha is also grammatically correct. Jagadnatha, because yaronunasiko nunasike, so yaronunasike nunasiko va vikalpena atra anuswarade parasavarnah bhavati. Finally, one example of lakara. This is actually more theoretical example. Kamal namati. Kamal is a lakaranta word, name of some person. Kamal with a lakaranta pratipadikam namati padam. Kamal namati इत्यत्र लकारान्तं प्रातिपदिकम् अस्ति, अस्य पदस्य अन्ते विद्यमानस्य लकारान्तं पदम् अस्ति, अस्य पदस्य अन्ते विद्यमानस्य लकारस्य यरोनुनासिकेनुनासिको वा इति अनुनासिक लकारादेशे कमल नमति पक्षे कमल नमति इति लकारेण सह अपि तादृशं संभवति. So as I mentioned on time, that completes all the sutras. Very simple sutras. You already know all these sandhis. The only point was to explain the sutras. Nalopah pratipadikantasya pratipadika samnikam yat padam tadantasya nakarasya lopah syat. Naman becoming nama. Chohokuhu cha vargasya ka vargah syat jhali padante cha. So vach becoming vak. Jhalan jashonte padante jhalam jasah syuhu. So shasha becoming shada. मोनुस्वारः मान्तस्य पदस्य अनुस्वारः स्याद् हलि संहितायाम. हरिम प्लस वंदे मकार becomes अनुस्वार हरिम वंदे. नश्चापदान्तस्य झलि नस्य मस्य च अपदान्तस्य झलि अनुस्वारः स्यात् संहितायाम. So namsyati, the makar gets converted to anuswara namsyati. Similarly dhanunshi, the nakara gets converted to anuswara dhanunshi. वापदान अनुस्वारस्य परसवर्णः अनुस्वारस्य यै परतः परसवर्ण आदेशः स्यात् संहितायाम. So kapi becomes kanpa, then it becomes kampa with a makara. वापदान्तस्य पदान्तस्य अनुस्वारस्य यै परे परसवर्णः स्यात् संहितायाम. So for example harim namami, harin namami, then it gets converted to nakara adesha harin namami. And finally, yaronunasike nunasiko va yarapadasya anunasike pare anunasiko va syat samhitayam. So shash mukha, later on it becomes shada mukha and then shana mukha or shada mukha. Similarly, jagannath or jagadnath. I have given all these examples. A strict revision is necessary. Unless you do the revision, you cannot just recollect these examples and the sutrartha from memory like how I did right now. Regular revision specifically for these sutras is extremely mandatory. Let's go to the homework. The homework is slightly complex today. There are things in the homework on purpose which I have completely omitted from the class today. You don't need to refer any commentaries. You just need to think about these particular questions and then you will be able to understand you will be able to get the answers. The questions are complex. Let me go through the question. पदान्तमकारः स्वयं यर्वर्णः अस्ति तथापि तस्य विषये यरोनुनासिकेनुनासिको वा इति सूत्रं न कदाचित् प्रवर्तते. The yaronunasikenunasikova sutram that we studied towards the end it is never applicable for padanta makara even though it is a yer letter. Why? एकम उदाहरणं दत्वा स्पष्टीकुरुत. कुर्वन्ति इति णत्वे प्राप्ते तस्य असिद्धत्वात् अनुस्वारे परसवर्णे च कृते तस्य असिद्धत्वात् नणत्वम् इति कौमुदी वाक्यस्य कः अर्थः? I have already explained this. Dandinah ichha. Dandin is a sadhu, the one who carries a danda. So tasya ichha. Dandinah ichha. Itra shashthi samase krute. Dandinichha uta dandichha. Uchitam rutam rupam prakriyaya sadhayata. Next question. Padant jakarasya padant shakarasya cha kena sutrena kaha adeshah bhavati. Ekam udaharanam datta. And finally, Anusvarasya yayi parasavarna. I have taught this sutram. Anusvarasya yayi parasavarna ityasmin sutre yayi iti shabdah anavashakah asti iti kechana vayyakaranaha manyante. Tesham matena kevalam anusvarasya parasavarnaha ityeva vaktavyam. Is this correct? Kim idam uchitam spashti. So questions are complex, but guarantee you do not need to refer to any commentaries. Just think on the material that has been taught today and you will be able to answer all these questions. Finally, the second question. Valmiki virachitasya Ramayanasya prathamah shlokaha adha datta asti. Asmin shloke vidyamananam kesham api pancha hal sandhinam prakriyaha darshayata. So the Tapaswadhyaya Niratam shloka, which all of you hopefully know, is being written in a specific style. Follow this particular style. So Tapaswadhyaya Niratan Tapasvi Vagvidam Varam Naradam Paripapracha Valmikir Munipungavam. In exactly the way it is written, pick up 5 hal sandhis that are taught in today's class and derive the prakriya. An extra optional activity, you want to do it, you can do it, otherwise you can skip. अस्य श्लोकस्य अन्वयं प्रतिपदार्थं सरल संस्कृतेन अर्थम अन्विष्य लिखत. So that completes our discussion on padante hal sandhau adeshah. Here in the next class we are going to talk about padante hal sandhau agamaha. So the padanta case will remain, but now how an agama is created for that hal letter, that we will discuss in the upcoming class. अलक्नंदा जी.
नमस्कारः. शश इत्यत्र शकारस्य टकारः कथं भवति?
टकार ने डकारः. शकारस्य डकारः षड्.
परन्तु षट्कर्णी वा.
So that is the next step. चर्त्वे कृते. So चर्त्वम इति अस्माभिः अग्रे द्रक्ष्यते. So षट् इत्यत्र अग्रे चर्त्वे कृते षड् इति भवति. So that चर्त्वम is here. खरीच and वावसाने. So खरी परे झलाम चरह स्युः संहितायाम. अवसाने झलाम चरह स्युः. So if you just take the word षड्, there is an avasana after it. So avasane jhal varnasya char varnaha bhavati. So char is varga prathama. So shada becomes shat. So we will learn those sutras kharicha and vavasane in class number 37. Till that time, keep shada with you. Okay? Any further questions? You have one more question or your?
धन्यवादः.
Any further questions? Any discussion? Otherwise, samapayamaha. Agrima sapte niyamitarupena kakshadvayam bhavishyati. There is a minor delay in uploading the videos for yesterday as well as today. Over the weekend, I'll upload both the videos and I'll extend the deadline for the homeworks accordingly so that you have at least one weekend to look at the presentations and write the answers of the homework. So samapayamaha. What happened? Samapayamaha. Where is the Mangalacharanam? अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थिता वेदानामुपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनिये नमः. शब्द ब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान्यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनिये नमः. येन धौता गिरः पुंसां विमलैः शब्दवारिभिः तमश्चाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनिये नमः. धन्यवादः.